Okay, now, remember I was telling you about some of the motifs that are built in don't exactly have the best jumps, right? So I'm going to go to this little icon, which is my gallery. Remember we were talking about this one because it had little satin stitches, and it's kind of cute and heirloomy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if I click, I can position it any way I want. You know, you can see it's still active on my screen. I could, you know, I could flip it. If I right-click, I get a flip, okay? Those are kind of fun to play with, but if I want to fix this motif so that, you know, I can use it without having to trim things, I can come in and you can see all the parts and bits and pieces here, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I go out of Visualizer or 3D View, I can look and see if there's jumps. This one actually looks pretty good, but should there be jumps, this is what I can do. Edit, ungroup. And then I can look at these pieces. Okay, here's the first piece. Where's my in and out point? In, out, right? Here's the second piece. Where's my in and out point? In and out. You know, third piece. You know, that's a little run up to here. This one should be okay. This is coming back here. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. This one's looking pretty good, right? I'm not seeing any jumps except, you know, that's actually a digitized piece. But so that you know, if you run into one of the motifs that has jumps in it, you can come in here and you can readjust these in and out points, add a running line if you need to, or if you just want to enhance this a little bit more and make it a different motif, like maybe you want to take this whole motif and make it bigger. Whoops, wrong way. And instead of having to worry about flipping it around, you want to go ahead and group that. Have it so that it's already in a certain position. You can do things like that, right? You know where it ends, right there. And you can make that your own motif now.
But now move that down a little bit.
This one?
Yes. But still get that caught up. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Rotate it, something like that, so that they're...
Yes.
Yeah, you can do something like that. Or you can even do something like this. Okay, we have the one motif, right? Go in and find another motif that you really like. Yeah, because there's some neat little things in here. There's this one. There's the big flower. You know, there's this. You know, there's these bigger borders like for monograms. And then there's, you know, things like this, right? This is one of my favorite ones. Although I think this is the one that has the jumps. You could come in here and say, all right, I want to do a combo. See the jumps on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I could get rid of every one of those jumps by editing this and moving those in and out points or adding some lines. And this, by the way, is a gorgeous pattern when it stitches out. But, you know, so I can combine these and I could make a real interesting thing. I can also, let me move this one over, I can also resize these. So maybe I want something like that, right? Okay.
Now, did you get rid of any jump stitches in that?
No, I haven't gotten rid of any jump stitches in that one, but here, let me move this and we'll look at it, because it's got some issues. And some of the other ones do as well. I'm going about 200%. Okay, so if I turn off my visualizer, you can see all the jumps. See? So if I go in and I edit and I ungroup it, then I can say, okay, here's my first piece, the in and out points, in, out. Okay, that's good. Here's the problem piece, because I can see I'm jumping here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, you know, why the end point's all the way over there? Hard to tell, right? But let's move that to here. And if I still have a jump, let's go look at it's a triple running line. You know what? Do we really need a triple running line? Or, do we maybe just need, well, I guess we're not going to have too much of a choice. Backstitch line. Let's go ahead and we'll leave it at, we could do the single run line, and then we could do this backtrack. Okay? At the back, do you see what happened when I did the backtrack? Okay, it now becomes a, oh, well, it's not going to let me change the properties, I guess. Oh, yeah, it did. Okay, if I backtrack that, okay, now my in and out points are here, right? I've eliminated a jump, all right? So, okay, so see what I did? It made another line, basically. Here's, my next piece, in and out. See that little triangle up there? So, why is that out point up there? Oh, hard to tell. Let's move it back down here. Okay, now let's look at this piece. Same thing. See the jump? Why is that in and out point up there? Let's move it. Okay, and this piece, in and out, see? Then I've got these little funky pieces that come down here, and this piece, and then this piece, right? And, I might want to move some things around too, but let's start with let's move our in and out points so we get rid of those jumps. Okay, so there's my in and out points. Here's this piece. Let's check it out. In and out. Okay, we're good. In and out's probably the same here. Yep, we're good. And then there's this piece. Where's my in? Where's my out? That's not too bad either, because it's coming out to here. And this piece, I'm betting, there's my out point right there. There's my in point, which means that I start here and hit here, right? Now, I might want to look at that a little bit closer. But, if you get confused, you can always change the color. So I'm going to change that to blue for right now, because that's our last piece. But if I really want to line this up, I'd probably want to line this end up with this, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's this piece.
Yes.
And I've got this piece, and this is the piece right here. Let's change that color too. That's the piece I want to stitch last. So I'm just going to drag it down to here. And now I've got a jump, so, and I'll go ahead and move my out point back out to here. But I've got a jump right here from there to there. So, and that's not going to exactly do what I want, but the jump wouldn't be quite as bad from there. What I could do is I could backtrack it to here, right? See, I backtracked that. And I could take this piece and move it down here. And it'll pick up there. And then I have to move the out point because my out point's all the way down here. I would move, and if you can't see them that well, zoom in. And there's your out point. Move it to right there where that starts. Now let's look and see if we have any more jumps. Let me zoom in a little bit. We have a little minor jump there, but nothing like we did, right? So now I've got all those colors, so just click on colors. And left click, hold your shift key all the way down, and change it to whatever color you want. And there you go. So now when I, make this a motif, right? I'm going to group it so nothing moves. So edit group. Now when I make this my own motif, I won't be able to use it in the gallery, but what I will have is this. When I make that line, when I tell this how to line up, well, you know what? Let me just show you. Here's my out point. Here's my in point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. Embroidery, make motif, and redo motif. I'll just name it that. Okay. And then I'm going to say, the first point's here, and it ends here. See that angle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's make our line. And we'll make a straight line first. And there's my neat little motif, but, you know, since that thing kind of lies sometimes, I'm going to go ahead and hunt it in here, because I've discovered that because it says that on my screen during the videos does not mean that it's actually there. Okay, so I'm assuming that's going to be about right. That's going to be, you know, it's hard to say because it's a big, you know, motif. The preview window is not going to show it, so I'm going to say okay. And there we have it. And then, of course, I still have my editing options up here where, you know, I can click on, see when I click on those diamonds, I get the little, you know, skew, so I can skew that around. I can, you know, resize one of these bigger. You know, I can shrink it and flip it. See? See what's going on? With all of these little squares.
Oh, you're so, I don't know why I can't live next door.
And, you know, so I have all these options, and I can space it like it's lettering. So I can, you know, I can add a little, you know, difference here. Like this one's a little bit different than the other ones, right? You know, so I can make a pattern and make it a little bit different, but I still, if I go out of Visualizer, don't have any jumps in there. Isn't that nice? Except for that little one right there, which nobody is going to really notice, right? So that's how to handle. If you know, if you have a motif like this one, I just like this motif. It's just pretty when it stitches. But it used to drive me crazy because, you know, you're sitting there trimming all those jump stitches. And, you know, it just drives you kind of buggy. So you guys are good on these now, right? I'm going to see all kinds of motifs and all kinds of neat little things, right?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to...
Right. You got it.
Focus tonight.
Yeah. All right, let me move my controls. I'm going to close this down. And now we're going to talk about handling multiple hooping because we have this unique way to do it in the program. You know, there's continuous hoops in some of the other machines, but this program has a neat little thing. And I'm going to go ahead and, I think I ungrouped this one, didn't I? Let me see. I'll take this one. So we'll go from here. Okay, so from here to here, I think, is what it is. Okay, so copy, Control-C, make a new file, Control-V. Okay. If I'm making a big giant design on a border, zoom out. Let me go ahead and group this back together. I'm just going to shrink this down. I wouldn't normally do it this way, but I'm going to go ahead and just shrink it for right now. Okay, if you have, let me see, the 140 by 200 hoop, right? Let's go ahead and let's center this. Okay, so I still need to shrink this border down a little bit. But if I'm making like the edge of curtains, or I want to make this big long run of something, right? You know, I'm going to fit these lines into my hoop size, right?
Right.
And, you know, I'm going to, you know, I could just do it this way. Let's go hit our dimensions. Oh, yeah, I better leave it that way. Okay, so. No, I guess we'll go back there. How's that? I'm not quite sure what that was about, but.
What happened? You got two different things.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just a graphic thing because the recorder. All right, so let me shrink this down. Okay, so there we go. There's our pattern, right? Now, I want to make this nice big long run, or at least a reasonably long run, right? Well, in the Eleanor program and the Janome program, I have an option to do this large layout. And what you need to look for, which is this bar here. See this toolbar? I'll pull it down. Yours is probably on the bottom if you haven't, moved yours around. Let me see if I can grip it. See these two little squares right here?
Yes.
Okay, that's my work area. If I hit that work area and I zoom out, it's quite large. Okay, let's go to 25%. See how big that green little section is?
Right.
Okay, I can define the work area. Do I need it to be 1,000 millimeters wide? No, I'm just doing this neat little border, right? So maybe I need it to be like 200 wide. My height, if you're not sure, leave it there, right? And say, okay. And, we'll see if we can move this over a little bit, see if it'll center it. There we go. Okay, so see this green space? That's my work area. Don't let it throw you. Here is your hoop display. You can turn off your hoop. If you need to, you can turn off your grid, and it makes things a little more clear, right? I'm going to select this, copy, paste, and I'm just going to move it up, and then I'll zoom in. And you can zoom in as much as you need. You just press the B key and zoom in, and I'm going to align these things, right? Now, I know that this is only going to fit into, one hoop, right? See? It's only going to fit, one design, right? But, maybe maybe I want to make a very, very long border. You just keep, copy and pasting and aligning this. Right? So there's my big long border. If I look at how big it really is, if I go to 100%, I might make it longer, I might make it shorter. I have a little more room here. See? And I can go up to 1,000 millimeters, which I'm not sure how many inches that is, but, it's pretty good size. It's about 6 sheets of paper, I think. Okay, so now I've done this, and I want to make sure that I have templates to print out. So, I can do, here's my define, here's my work area, right? See this little flower icon right here called
Yes.
Combine Mode? When I click on Combine Mode, let me zoom way out so you can see what's going on. See that hoop there? That's my first design in the center, right? See where it's highlighted
That's
green?
your work area.
That's, that hoop is telling me when this is shaded, very bright green, that section is one piece that's capable of fitting into my hoop. Okay? Whatever hoop I have defined. See, I have the hoop up here, right? I can come in here and say, I'm going to use this hoop. And no matter what I do, I can't get that design to turn green because, it's not built for that size hoop. So always select the best hoop for the design. Okay, so there's the first piece, right? I would like to get these other two pieces to highlight green too, so I'm going to add a hoop. See what it did? Added a hoop. I'm going to move that down until everything in there turns green. And I can use the arrow key to nudge this. See when it turned green? But I still have some black there. I just nudge. See where those are black in the middle?
Right.
I just nudge with the arrow keys until it turns green. So I've got, excuse me, two sections now, right? I add another hoop, and I drag that hoop up here. And, I try to keep my hoops kind of aligned as best I can, right? And same thing, I'm just going to nudge it until, see, the little hearts turned green. The center section's now turned green. And, now I've got everything green. And I can align these by nudging them side to side, too. All right, so I've got this nice little run here, and everything is bright green, right? So, I'm in combine mode. I can go out of combine mode now. And let me think, I might have to, it's been a while since I've done this. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go into print preview so you can see what's going on here. When I'm in combine mode, what I get are these little pieces. I'm going to put my cloth center markers, which are the center markings. I don't have my grid turned on, so it won't make any difference, but I'll go ahead and show the hoop so you can see it. And, okay, see what's going on? See the number here? That was the third hoop I put in. This is the second hoop I put in. Let me see if I can go to the next page. There's the first hoop, which is on the bottom. First hooping, second hooping. Okay, third hooping. Does that make sense now?
Yes, but how do you know where? Do you have to center it in your hoop?
In my hoop, yep.
And that's how you get it to line up inside the hoop, is by centering it, putting the crossbars and up and
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, let me go in and I'll do the print preview again, but I'm going to take off some of the options here because it's in the video just is making it kind of go blinky. So I'm going to turn off, like, you know, the hoop, and we'll leave the cloth setter. We want actual size, and I guess I don't think I have the grid turned on, but see what work area does. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is what I would print out. So I've got, you know, see these little crosses right here?
Yes.
That's how you know how to line it up. Like, you know, this is, you know, 2, 2. So you're going to line up 2, 2 and 1, 1 down here. You're going to tape these together. It's a template. So you end up with this big long run of template on these 3 pages. See, there's my third page. But what it tells me, these cloth setter markings, see where, other than my screen's going blinky, but, you know, see where it says 1 here? That tells me it's the first hooping. Number 2 is the second hooping, and I'm going to make crosshairs on my fabric, you know, to match this. Don't do all your crosshairs at one time. I use my eyelet punch. You guys, you know if you were at, you know if you've taken webinars, the eyelet punch, since I have no little girls and since you can actually buy them at the store and they're very cheap, I use my eyelet punch to punch perfect little round holes at the top of each of these, and top and bottom, and then in the center. So I have, you know, 5 holes, and I go dot, 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 right? And then I draw my lines with my marker, my wash away or air away marker. And I'll extend them. I don't make them just short like this. I extend those lines. And what's going to happen is you're going to do that first page. You know, you're going to do this first section, right? And then you're going to do the second section. And you're going to use this template to align, to mark your fabric. And then when you take it to the machine, you're going to take and make sure that your needle is right above those crosshairs that you drew. You're going to turn your hand wheel and drop that down right above the fabric and make sure it's lining up on that crosshair, right? And if it doesn't, then what you're going to do is you're going to use the arrow keys on your machine to move it into position. If you have the Exquisite, you can use this and do the multi-hooping, Nancy. Okay. So, you know, it depends on what machine you have. Barbara, do you still have the Exquisite, or do you have the you have the 9600?
I have the 9600.
Okay, you're going to use your arrow keys. Nancy, you have that GPS system.
Right.
Where you're going to, you know, when you go to do this, if you want to make sure that these align every single time,
Yes.
you're going to, you know, mark your lines, right?
Right.
And you're going to, you know, I mark my first lines first and do it. Then I align this up, you know, and give it a little bit of overlap, like, you know, where this next border would be, right?
Right.
And, you know, then I would draw my crosshairs. You're going to say 0.1, 0.2, 0.3.
Right.
Up, you know, up, down, and over. And then it will
Yes.
align this every single time just accurately.
Right.
Okay, now that's way number one. If you want to make sure, let me go out of combine mode. If you want to make sure that everything lines up correctly, I had these all grouped. Well, I guess not. Now you know why you group things, right? Here's my first section. Let me group it. And my second section. And here's the third section. Okay, so all three of those are grouped. If you really wanted to, you could change the colors on these. I'm just going to make these solid so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Maybe, yeah, that whole thing went solid. Okay. And here's red. And we'll make this one blue. Okay, so see those three sections? Before you combine these two sections, before you add another section, what you could do to make sure that everything's going to line up is you could do this. At the beginning and the end of these, you could add a line. Okay, here's my beginning. You can add a basting line. Select the running line, and you want to overlap a little tiny bit, just a little bit. So I would make the line, left click, hold your control key to get a straight line. And, you can make this a baseline. And I'm going to select it and stretch it out on the other end a little bit. Or, we can just center it like that. Okay, see, there's my baseline. Let's go in and I'll make this stitch length longer. How's that? And if I wanted to, I actually can make the dimensions bigger here too. Let's make this 40 millimeters, right? Okay, so there's my line, right? That would stitch first. So let's make this blue. Okay, that's going to stitch first, right? Then this is going to stitch, and you always can tear that out. Then you're going to go all the way up to the top. You're going to stitch that first. You're going to stitch the pattern, and then you're going to go up to the top. And you can do, yeah, because of that, you don't want to stitch on top of it. So I would do it this way. Here's this and this. You want to make sure these are centered. So hold your control key, and you want to make sure that these are centered vertically. Okay, now you know that those are perfectly centered, right? So now we're going to go up to the top, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make a line. So, even if you start here, because you want that little tiny overlap, left click, hold your control key, make a straight line. Change it to, you can leave it as this color. It doesn't matter if you want, if you want to make it the same color. But what you definitely want to do is you want to tell it that it's a basting line. And, make it the same dimension as the other one. We made it 40, right? Let me zoom out so I can show you what I've got. I am going to change the color of that just so you can see it. Okay, so what I've got is, there's the first line, there's this line, and there's the third line. Select them all. Make sure that they are all centered vertically or horizontally. Depends on what you're doing, but on this it's vertically. So this is going to stitch first, this line. We'll turn it to pink, right? The pink line is going to stitch first. Then the pattern. Then that last line. And what happens is this. I know, even using my templates, sometimes things just don't quite line up the way you want, right? So, I know that if I stitch the pattern, and when I go to stitch the next thing, if those two lines don't line up, say pink line, pattern, blue line, pink line, pattern, blue line. So if the blue line and the pink line don't line up,
you're in trouble.
You need to adjust it so that they do. Okay? Does that make sense now?
Yes.
So it's just a little added cushion to make sure that it lines up. Even if you're doing the combine mode and you print those templates, right? You want to make sure that they line up. And you can see because I put that line in there, I'm going to have to wiggle it down a little bit to get it to select everything and turn green. Okay? Does that make sense now? It's just, no matter what machine you have, it is just a little added benefit. Okay, now the other thing that you should consider, because you can see where my hoops are, I'm not auto lined up. Go to Setup, Work Environment, make sure you're automatically centered, and then that'll center that in whatever hoop you select. Okay? And you can do this, like, you don't have to just do this with borders. Okay? You can do this with any big design.
Bernie, I did one of these.
Uh-huh. You did?
I did one. It's posted. It's posted on the Xers site under my pictures. It's a banner. It was about 24 by 24.
Oh, neat. Okay.
It's lettering and a railroad crossing.
Oh, I'll have to go look. Okay. See, this is just such a fun little tool, isn't it?
It was. It was neat.
It makes it, you know, no matter what machine you have, right? Because, Nancy, you know how to make your hoops, right?
Yes.
Okay, no matter what hoop you pick. Like, I can come in here and I can say, you know, there's my exquisite hoop, right? And, you know, go to the combine. And it's the same thing. I just have to move those hoops around to make sure that everything's selected. Same exact thing. I just have to tell it before I start what hoop I'm going to use. That's it. So, you know, use that option. You can always turn it off. If it's driving you crazy, you can turn it off and go play with it later. But once you combine them, you can see I've got these hoops on my screen, right? Once I combine them in the program, you know, they're combined. They're basically combined. You can see my hoops on, right? Hoops on, hoops off. Because I combined them, even if I turn off the green layout work area, then, you know, it's going to think they're combined until I delete some things. But, you know, when you do this, save your file, give it another name so you don't write over top of your original one. And, you know, you can do infinite borders on this, you know, especially if we put these lines in. Even if we exceed the pages here, all I have to do is, you know, line this up with the center, and I pretty much know that I've got this lined up, right?
Yes.
And so it's just kind of a repeat border. It allows you, it's like the continuous hoop on the Exquisite, only bigger. So do you guys
I can do that.
You guys have any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so
I'll just sit
I'm good.
quietly.
Okay, now, one thing I do want to cover, we're pushing 9:30, so I'm going to cover a couple of things. Next week, the next session, which is not next week because I'm in Paducah, right?
Yeah.
But the week after, it's going to be a review, but we're still going to cover some additional things in that. So I want you to, you know, you've got 2 weeks to come up with a bunch of questions and homework. So, Shirley, Shirley, can you still hear us? And do you have any questions at all? Because we cannot hear you. Either that or you're a very, very quiet person. Shirley? I'm waiting to see if she types in a note or anything. Because I know she's still here. We've just lost her audio. Okay, so Shirley, if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the comments. There she is. No questions. Okay. So, all right. So now, Joining. When you do joining, or the new politically correct name is joining. It used to be called faggoting. Okay? So they're both the same thing. But when you do that in the program, like if you wanted to join something, I'll go ahead and make a new file and get rid of the work area here. If you wanted to join something, I'm going to use the grid too. If you wanted to join something, it's very easy. You're going to use like a wash-away backing, or you're going to use tearaway stabilizer underneath it. And what you're going to do is, pretend these big chunks of areas are, pieces of fabric, right? Here's fabric number 1. And fabric number 2. Okay? You're going to put wash away, and you don't join things like this far apart. Well, you could if you're doing hem stitching, I guess. But, we'll move these a reasonable distance apart. Okay? So if you want to join these two pieces of fabric and you use a wash away stabilizer, you have a choice. You can stick it down. You can, with like rescue tape or something, stick it into position and hope that you get things correct. Or you can use, the same principles of applique. Here's your placement line. Put it inside the area. How wide is this going to be? There's my placement line, right? Because you want to catch some of the fabric. And let me change that to something besides pink so you can see it. Okay, placement lines. See them? Can you guys see those? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's my placement lines. I stitch those down first. I put the fabric into place. I don't have to stitch them again. You know what I mean? I don't need to restitch them if I'm sticking them to those lines. However, I like things to stay in place, and I don't like to have to worry about them moving. And in the case of embroidery, I'll nudge this over a little bit maybe. In the case of embroidery, sometimes it's good to give your stitching something else to hold on to. But when you're joining, you're going to have a nice clean edge here, or you might have your entre-deux edge here, right?
Yes.
But if you're doing fabric, you're going to have this. If you're going to have your entre-deux, don't restitch it. You just stick it into place. But you can do, very simple stitches. You can make a line and actually do, I'm going to hold the control key again so it's perfectly straight. You can use some of the built-in stitches as well. Just go to your details and, take a look at your motifs. What motifs are there? Well, hold on. Let me go to the lines. I always forget to select this. Okay, object detail, single running line or motif run line. We'll do motif. Okay, now I have some real neat things. I can select anything from the Embroidery Gallery like this. I can go in and I can look at whatever motifs I've made. I can go to the blackwork ones, although, you may not want to connect necessarily with the blackwork, right? But, there's some neat little things, like this one might do okay. You're just going to have to check if this one might do okay. What you want to do is, these stitches are going to be floating here, right? They're just going to float. You want to catch these edges, and they have to be secure enough here to be able to hold. So probably most of these are not going to work for you. In your Embroidery Gallery, this one probably isn't going to work well either, even though it looks kind of interesting because of this center section, right?
Mm-hmm.
The satin stitching ones won't work. You're going to look for something that's a little more feathery. Let me scroll down and see what we've got. In worst case, if we can't find anything, we'll make our own, right? There you go.
What about that one?
That one would work. We're going to check it, but that one should work. This one might work. This one should work. This one might even work. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and we'll stick with This one might even work, actually. So you've got a bunch of different options here. This one probably not. Only if you stretched it, this one would work. So let's go and this one would definitely work. Let's go ahead and say make current, and so would that one. But we'll go ahead and we'll make this current. And you can see it's got like a little stitch in there. You know, we're not quite sure what size that is, so let's increase this width to, we'll try 6. Okay, and let me zoom in and show you what's going on. Okay, I've got the little stitch there. I increased the width. You know, that probably isn't going to work nearly as well as what we hoped. But you know what, if it doesn't, no big deal. Just go back into your objects and go back and select a different stitch. Let me scroll down. There we go. And that's 9 by 9. I'm going to make this a little shorter because I want some overlap on those stitches, right? It did not overlap. We'll try 8. I don't know why sometimes it does that, but okay, now I've got a little overlap there, see? But let's go back in, and I'm going to take this down to 7.5, and there's a little better overlap, right? I would test stitch this to make sure it's going to work. But to be honest, it's really not hard to make your own. Let me zoom out a little bit. You know, here's the one that, you know, I made there. It really is not hard to make your own and make sure that it works. You know, it could be as simple as a zigzag. But I would want to maybe catch these lines here.
How do you get rid of that?
Get rid of what?
That one. Did you make that one?
No, that one's in the program. But see what I'm doing? I'm making this X, right?
Yes.
And, you know, I can do this across a couple of times if I want it to be a little beefier. And my X is not going to be perfect, but you know what? Let me go this way. Okay, so there's my X. Let me change the color too. It's not perfect, but just to give you an idea. Okay, there's my X, right? Make that a motif, make your own motif, and put it in here that you know for sure works. You can do this, but this is like a normal faggoting stitch that you would use on your machine, right? The little feather stitch. But just because it works on your machine does not mean it's going to work in embroidery. Because what it comes down to is how these stitches overlap and connect. And
I think that one doesn't work.
Right, this is not going to work because of this and because of that, but...
And because your fabric would move. It wouldn't move like it's supposed to.
Right, so that one's not going to work. This one, however, would work, but we need to do something else, and this is something else. Besides being neater about this, we need to do something else, right? Okay, you guys get the point, right? Worst case, if you find something like this, you know, you just go in here and, you know, move your points, right? But you guys,
where did you get your...
This is the one I just made.
What stitch did you use?
I just used a running stitch. Like I'll stay up on the grid so you
Okay.
can see what I'm doing. I just used the running stitch, and what I did was I started here, you know, started up here, made an X is what I did. You know, I came across, made the X, and, you know, I just kind of wanted to throw it in there real quick. But, you know, if you wanted to make this a little beefier, you just go across it a couple of times, right? Okay, now, there we go. I'm starting up there, I'm ending there. Just remember that. There's my X. It's a little neater now. But I need to do one more thing because see those spaces in there, those stitches? First off, they'll connect with your bobbin thread, but they're going to get very curly-ish. They don't look nice and smooth. So I'm going to select it, go to my object details. I'm going to make this, like, I'll make it 15 millimeters in length. Watch what happens here. See? So what I have now is, let me get rid of all of this. You know, if you're going to do this and you know that you want things a certain width apart, make your motif that wide and save it. Like, I don't particularly need it quite that wide. Now that will work because I'm, you know, crossing here. You know, that is going to make a point in the middle here. Because I put, you know, it's crossing over, so I'm going to have some strength there. Does that make sense? If you want to have no, you know, absolutely no stitches at all, like no needle points, you can go into these object settings and make this like 50 if you want. It's going to create a needle point anywhere that I dropped a point. You know, anywhere that there's one of these nodes, there's going to be a needle point. And what's going on here is there is actually no needle point. There's no node for me to get unless I put one here, right? So this is going to make very long stitches. Is that making sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're going to have like these very long stitches here. You could make this shorter so that they're a little bit tighter. You could actually just copy and paste and you know, catch them how you want. You could do this, you know, you're ending there, and then you could come up with something like this. Let me hold my shift key and make a square, I guess. Well, okay. You know, I know I made that. Okay, so you could do something like this even. You're in control of that motif, so you could do all kinds of things. Like if you did, you know, the satin stitching like this, you could come in here and, you know, make this density very low, take out any underlay. And you could do something like this, okay? You know, you could even connect these so you have like a unique pattern. All it has to do is stretch across here. And one more thing I forgot to tell you is, you know, auto split. We don't need auto split, but I'll take this density way down. See? So you could make this a circle. You could make it anything pretty much you wanted, as long as it's attaching to the fabric, right? Now, with that being said, you can also make hem stitching. You know, same principle. You know, I would come up across here. You know, how many lines across do you want? How much, you know, how much, I guess, shagginess do you want in here? You know, you guys know what hem stitching is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, I'm not going to, you could make this any pattern that you wanted, and then add your entre-deux stitch to, I'm just going to go kind of grab it and copy it, right? And we'll save that. And you can add entre-deux to this. No, let me catch that. You know what? We're just going to take all of the purple and we'll sort it out when we get there. Okay, when you do hem stitching, technically I can get rid of this and this and hold on, let me undo because I would flip. See where my motif, that line is? I'm going to just flip this and then go back and do that. So, you know, when you do hem stitching, right, and joining, I'll have to, oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so there's, hem stitching is actually done, I would shrink that down a little bit, but so that you know, old-fashioned hem stitching, where you're going to tear threads out, is done like this. These are a little bit shorter, about half that height, okay? And you could adjust that in the program. You can actually come in, select your motif line. Well, I guess I got the wrong line, but anyway, there's a way to adjust it. Let me get rid of some of these lines so I can find the one I want. There we go. Okay, here's my entree, right? My spacing is okay. I can space that a little bit shorter if I want, but let's make this 3. See that, shorten up? And I guess my spacing would have to be 3. I probably would redo this, but old-fashioned hem stitching is done with a stitch that is similar to this. Okay, there's a zigzag stitch. And why it turned orange, I'm not really sure, but let me change it to purple again. There is a little zigzag stitch, and I would space these out a little bit more. These are kind of close together, and make them join up at the top. Old-fashioned hem stitching is done with these little short satin stitches coming down, so that when you cut out the fiber in between here and you draw threads, you don't have, like this would come down maybe to here, right? You don't have fraying going on. Does that make sense now? Did I lose you guys on that? You know what hem stitching looks like, right? With the strings in between?
You lost me.
Okay. Old-fashioned hem stitching, so that when you're cutting threads, because with old-fashioned hem stitching, what you're doing is you actually have 2 pieces of fabric here, right? And what you're doing is you're cutting the threads here. Like in between, you would have 2 lines, 2 sides, right? And you would cut the threads, going lengthwise or going, up and down in this case. And all that would leave would be these threads, like fraying your jeans. Remember when you used to fray jeans? Did you guys ever do that? Fray your jeans?
No.
Ah, okay.
No.
I'm going to have to find some hem stitching pictures, because what it is it's called drawn thread work too. Have you guys seen drawn thread work?
No.
All right, well, let's go do a search while we're here. Oh, I must have caps on. Okay. Okay, here's some. That's done with the wing needle, right? Here's an example. That's a little bit too fancy. Here's one where, you're using a wing needle too. Pull thread, drawn thread work. Here we go. Trying to find just a picture of it, but see what she's doing where she's got like those little pieces there? I don't want to open up a video as we're recording, but see what she's got, those little pieces there? Let's see what this has. It's a way of pulling threads out. And I don't know if it's going to show you that either. Let me see. Nope, it doesn't really show it. I'll find a good picture of hem stitching, because it's like creating shaggy things in between. You're actually pulling out the weave of the fiber, and it's really great for linen or loose wovens. And it makes this unique little section in between. But that's what else you can do with the entree stitch is you're going to have these little pieces coming down that protect the fabric from completely unraveling and your heavier decorative stitches from falling out. So it's like this little buffer zone to stop the fraying. I hope that makes more sense. But, all right, ladies. Next week, we're going to finish up with doing some embroidery anglaise, which is similar to cut work, but a little bit different. I'm going to take you through a pattern, not completely, just a section of it. and then, we'll do the review. So if you guys have any questions, start writing them down. If you get, well, not next week, in 2 weeks, get your homework ready. And I'm going to send these files up to the website so you have them. You can tear them apart. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. You guys have any questions at all?
I don't like what you've just done, so I don't know if I can handle that.
Well, if you can do these, I'll be happy. I don't do draw and thread work anymore. I used to way back in the day when I had to have a sample for it, right? But I would so much rather just make my embroidery machine make those little shaggy threads across there than have to pull out the weft of something, right? So like an adjoining thing, I would treat it like a joining thing, and I'll come up with a design.
I'm not going to worry about that one.
Well, I'll come up with a design so you can see what I'm talking about, and I'll see if I can find some good pictures. How's that?
That's good.
Okay.
So, Shirley, you have any questions at all?
No.
You're back.
I was here.
Oh, yeah, we couldn't hear you before. So,
Well, my voice is getting hoarse more and more as the evening goes on.
oh, yeah, I was there a couple of weeks ago. So, well, ladies, anybody heading to Paducah?
No.
Oh, what am I going to do with
I
you
love
guys?
you.
No.
I'm going to bed.
You're going to
I'd love
bed
to
now?